First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to return to your congregation. And I also, before I start, I wanted to do a minor modification to the title of my talk, Local Government as a Source of Good When People Demand It. Okay. Generally, many people view government in one of two ways. They see government as either inept or corrupt. The issues we've had with our water and water infrastructure, coupled with the condition of our roads, have many of us shaking our heads, disappointed and wondering if government can do anything, if local government can do anything that's right. When we learned that Cane Beef had an unpaid water bill exceeding $2 million, many of us probably felt like the normal functioning of local government was corrupt, grossly sympathetic to business while at the same time being dismissive of marginalized populations. These issues may seem minor compared to what we've seen on national news, like the separation of children from their parents who are seeking asylum. I know that I personally, if I have a hectic day, when I get home from work, I'll turn on the national news with a quick prayer that nothing major has happened. Even as I try to stay on top of local issues, I find my attention diverted toward the telenovela of national government. The reality is, though, that we have to focus on the local. We as a community can have a much more immediate and dramatic impact on the way our local government operates than we can have at the national level. The challenge is that our local news, with its limited resources and for-profit motives, often don't provide us with the necessary information to be informed citizens. With the current state of affairs, it is up to us to be our own watchdogs and our own advocates for the greater good. We can't afford to be uninformed about the decisions and operations of local government. What we have to remember is that we are governed by rules and laws, but unlike the laws of nature, the laws governing people, organizations, and businesses are social rules. And social rules can be changed through coordinated and collective action. Through our activities, we can transform the rules that govern our lives. Often, though, rules are not neutral. They can constrain some behaviors and they can foster freedom. We can turn to history to see examples of when government has been used to enhance the quality of life of marginalized populations. But what is important to remember is that government is an instrument that can be used by those who actively pursue its power. To be certain, the rich and those already in power are better able to manipulate the levers of government. After all, they are the ones who write and enforce the rules. The further away we are from the center of power, the harder it is for the regular and marginalized populations to have their interests protected and furthered. And this is why I think it is important for us, despite what we see at the national level, to focus our attention on what's happening locally. Very soon, the City Council is going to make decisions about the 2018-2019 budget, and council members are grappling with a $1.3 million deficit. There are 9 people on our City Council: the mayor, 3 at-large council members, and 5 district-level council members. They ultimately get to decide what is going to happen to our budget. These people and their levers of power can be affected by vocal and organized citizens who advocate for the greater good. We can use our voices to protect our libraries, senior centers, and parks and recreation budget. These parts of our local government provide an important and vital services to our community. Public libraries enhance a community and are fundamental to democracy. They provide the public with access to newspapers, magazines, books, and DVDs for free. At public libraries, people have access to copy machines, reference librarians, and local public history archives, and the internet. As more business put job announcements and job applications online, and as schools rely more on internet resources, libraries play an incredibly important role for those people who don't have access to internet at home. Public libraries provide families and children with wonderful activities and learning opportunities. Public libraries house our government documents, reports, and notices. Public libraries are information centers. They play a critical role making information accessible to everyone. And to a healthy democracy, we need to have a well-informed citizenry. A well-funded library system has the capacity to be a great equalizer in our society by making news and information accessible to all people, irrespective of their ability to pay. On top of all that, our public libraries provide spaces for us to enjoy artwork by the local artists. Public libraries are a good that anyone can enjoy. Their mission is to serve the public. They are democratic spaces. They are communal spaces. They are safe spaces. They are public spaces. They're a public good. Local government determines the budget of our library system. The budget has a profound impact on our library circulations, hours of operation, and programming. Julie Travis Rogers is a member of For the Greater Good and sits on the city's library committee. There in March, she learned that the library budget could be cut by as much as 6%. Her service on that committee taught her that budget cuts could be devastating. Budget cuts mean fewer staff and hours of operation and a threat to our library's accreditation. Losing accreditation would prohibit our libraries from being able to pursue additional funding opportunities. Julie reached out to me and Sylvia Campos, and we started going to city council meetings and using our 3 minutes of public comments to advocate for libraries and public services. We noticed that the city council was not receptive to our advocacy, so we decided to launch a Save the Libraries petition. Some of you may have signed it. We used the petition to inform people about the proposed cuts, and we asked people to sign our petition to stop them. We let the city council know what we were doing, and we reached out to our friends for help. And after about 3 weeks, about 15 of us were able to collect more than 2,500 signatures. The action garnered media attention, and before we even turned in those signatures, we learned that the library cuts were off the table. Local elected officials bent to the public's will. Mayor McComb and Councilmember Rubio still seem to want the library budget cut, but we have not heard the other council members take that position. So it appears we've stopped the budget cuts for now. When this budget battle is over, we're going to need to fight for more resources for our libraries. Compared to other cities our size, we are severely underfunding our public libraries. We can do better. Senior recreation centers are another important public good that local government provides. Most of our senior centers are only open part-time, a few hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week. These public spaces provide safe, cool places for our elders to go and spend time with others. These centers are air-conditioned, and not all seniors can afford air conditioning. So especially during the hot summer months, these centers are incredibly important. At senior centers, meals are served, medications are checked, seniors are provided information about programs. They play games like loteria and chair volleyball. They listen to music, they walk, they dance, they do yoga, they exercise. These places are extremely important for people living on fixed incomes and are especially important for our elders of color. When we learned that the city was considering closing Broadmoor Senior Center, members of For the Greater Good were outraged. Our Save the Libraries campaign was successful, so we wanted to use that momentum we were building to stop the closure of Broadmoor Senior Center, as well as the rest of the budget cuts to our Parks and Library Department. We started a social media action to try to make our council think about the human costs of these budget cuts. I visited a couple of senior centers, which I hadn't done in about 10 years, to talk to the elders, to learn what they knew about the budget cuts and what their concerns were. Going to the centers and talking to the seniors broke my heart. I was reminded of how important a neighborhood senior center and a local library are. The elders I spoke to were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Most of them were people of color. They were born in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Think about that. They were going to school when segregation was still legal, when attempts at integration were grossly resisted. Flower Bluff Independent School District was still busing black students out of its school district to a black school in CCI ISD until 1963. Corpus Christi Independent School District didn't make a concerted effort to integrate its schools until after 1970, until after it lost a lawsuit. These elders at Broadmoor and at other centers were educated at a time and worked during a time when racism was still sanctioned by the state. Their work, their wages, and benefits, if they had any, were shaped by the opportunities that were denied to them in their youth. These senior centers are important ways we can give back to a community who have already been denied too much. And during the spring, one of the options entertained to deal with the budget deficit was to close Broadmoor Center. There was no regard for their lived experience. The priority of the council was to cut costs, to eliminate deficits. Taking away these elders' public spaces was just a price to pay. Yet Broadmoor Center cost the city only $57,000 a year to operate. We, for the greater good, believed the city could do better. We believe seniors deserve better and engaged in direct participatory action. For the greater good, members like Dorothy Pena and allies for the greater good like Pastor Carrington visited senior centers and asked elders to take a picture with a sign that we had made. We posted those pictures in our Facebook group and we tweeted them to the city council. Try to do it every day. Our hope was that the council members would see the elders' faces and have an awakening of conscience and keep Broadmoor open. Another For the Greater Good member, Emily Munoz, went to the Pride Parade and the summer music and movie events at Cole Park to ask people to participate in our action. In addition to keeping the centers open, we wanted the mayor to send a letter to corporations with industrial district agreements asking for them to donate money to the Parks and Recreation Department. They're looking at $621,085 in budget cuts. The deficit is 1.3, so their potential cuts are almost half of the deficit. After a few short weeks of our sign the letter strategy, we got some more good news. Broadmoor Senior Center would stay open. This time, a council member called me directly to give me the good word. See, direct participatory actions by community members compelled city officials and budget officers to respond to our demands. In one budget workshop, a budget official actually said removing the library cuts and senior center closures was a direct result of the input they had received from the community. They heard us. The current challenge is that officials are still proposing a huge cut to our Parks and Recreation Department. For the Greater Good members, Ronnie Vela and Chris Phelan attended the town hall at the mall to get details about what would be affected. In addition to zeroing out money for playground equipment and trees, the city was looking at reducing staff. We have to recall that for several years now, the city has been selling off our public parks to private interest groups. For far too long, interest groups have been quietly pillaging our public resources for their own private gain. They have been using the levers of power to take advantage of rules to enrich themselves. And in that process, they and a complicit city council, actually complicit city councils, because this has been going on for decades, have produced the conditions that have led us to fighting for the scraps that fund our libraries, senior centers, and Park and Recreation Department. In the 1970s, the state gave cities the authority to create industrial districts and enter into what are called industrial district agreements. I'll be referring to those as IDAs now. Since 1980, Corpus Christi has maintained industrial districts. Right now, we have 2 districts and 72 agreements. Those with IDAs are technically not within Corpus Christi city limits and don't have to pay taxes. They pay fees that are called payments in lieu of taxes, or pilots. The pilot rate is only 62.5% of what their property values should be on the existing improvements to their property. Any new improvements made to their property are exempt from these pilots for 4 years. That means they pay 0 fees on any improvements they make for 4 years. On top of that, Nueces County is responsible for determining the property values. Corporations have been contesting the values of their property, and because they are so rich and so powerful, Nueces County does not take these corporations to court to fight over the values. Instead, the county enters into negotiations. Such actions make the city's budget vulnerable to the corporations that challenge their property values. In the past, corporations with IDAs like Valero, Citgo, Flint Hills, and Imogene Resins, even after getting the breaks that they get with these industrial agreements, still contest their property values. And those fights have an impact on the amount of pilot money that Corpus can receive. And it has an impact on all other jurisdictions, like school districts. Those fights have an impact on our budgets. For example, originally for the 2017-2018 year, the city expected to collect $11 million in pilots. The final number is actually closer to $9.4 million. That $1.6 million drop could easily have covered the services we're fighting for right now. Pilots aren't the only special treatment that corporations get. They also get reduced water rates. For example, if you're a commercial property inside the city, limits you pay a standard amount of money for the first 2,000 gallons of water you use per month. Then you pay an additional $7.05 for every additional 1,000 gallons per month. If you're outside the city limits, like those with IDAs, you only have to pay $3.30 for every additional 1,000 gallons. If you're a large volume water user in the city limits, each month you pay a standard fee for the first 10 million gallons of water. After that, you pay $5.80 for each additional 1,000 gallons. If you're outside the limits, like those with IDAs, you only pay $2.20 for each additional 1,000 gallons. So you see, they don't pay their fair share on their property values, and they don't pay their fair share on their water bills. The beautiful thing, though, about these industrial districts and industrial district agreements is that we don't have to have them. We can have them. The state of Texas gave us the authority to have them, but we don't have to. The current agreements we have are set to expire December 31st, 2024. Negotiations for the next IDAs begin in 2022 or 2023. We have some time to engage in both traditional and non-traditional strategies to get these corporations to pay their fair share. These industrial district agreements are just contracts that can be and are renegotiable. Contracts are social rules, and social rules are not like natural laws. These social rules can be changed. A small group of people advocating for corporate interests put these rules in place. Through consistent, persistent, coordinated, collective, focused action, we as community members can alter these rules for the benefit of the greater good. If we can demand that these corporations be treated just like the rest of us and work to change those rules so that they're held to the same standards that we are, it's going to have a huge impact. Even with just small tweaks to the industrial district agreements, our city budget can be replenished, our public spaces and services can be revitalized. Rather than fighting for scraps, we can build and enhance those spaces that foster community. But right now, the rules and the norms by which our community is operating are not for the greater good. They are written by and for those who already have plenty. Yet, the members of For the Greater Good are not discouraged. We're actually pretty excited. In Richmond, California, years of community organizing led a community to be able to use local government levers of power to raise the minimum wage, to challenge foreclosures and evictions, to expand affordable housing, to scale back corporate welfare, and to make their environment cleaner. Local community activists there were able to organize, mobilize, and use their people power to make their government work for the people, for the greater good. But it took years, right? Yet they were still able to do it. And seeing that what they have been able to accomplish fills us with hope. We know that we can do it here too. In March, when we first started attending city council meetings about the budget, there were only 3 of us. At the last city council meeting, there were at least 12 of us there, and about 11 of us spoke. We've been able to save the libraries. We've been able to keep Broadmoor open. What we have yet to do is to stop the cuts to the Parks and Recreation Department. But we're not giving up. Can you imagine what we can do with triple or double the number of people willing to engage in direct participatory democratic actions? Parks and Recreation is responsible for our playgrounds, our parks, our pools, and senior and recreation centers. If the Parks and Recreation budget cuts go through, there will be little or no maintenance at these places. There will be fewer hours of operation. These places will be less welcoming and open and used less often. And when they are used less often, because the city is using a zero budgeting strategy, we run the risk of losing those public spaces altogether, much like the way that we've been losing our parks. And we cannot afford this. Our public spaces are sacred spaces and critical for community building. We need more resources, not less. This department is responsible for many of our public spaces across the city. The more funding they have, the better those spaces can be maintained. The more materials they have, the longer their hours of operation are, the more programming they can offer, the more opportunities people have to come together and share experiences. The more experiences we share, the more opportunities we have to become familiar with and get to know one another. And when we do that, we can build trust with one another. That trust fosters a sense of community. That sense of community can make us as individuals feel safer, and it can help us be more empathetic toward others. It can cultivate kindness and civility. Like libraries, parks, pools, trails, playgrounds, senior centers, and recreation centers are transformative community spaces. At one point in time, Mayor McComb asked for ideas about how we could address our budget issues, and our For the Greater Good member, Sylvia Campos, is the one who came up with the idea of asking those those corporations with IDAs to donate more money to the Parks and Recreation Department. She knew these corporations weren't paying their fair share. She knew these corporations sponsor public events. So during public comments, Sylvia asked the mayor to send a letter to the corporation asking for donations. Then, at a later city council meeting, Sylvia actually took a letter she drafted for him so that he could send it to the corporations asking for the donations. This was the origin of our sign the letter action. It took many weeks for the mayor to respond to us, but we finally got our answer recently at a city council meeting. He's not going to sign the letter. He's not going to honor our request. For the Greater Good is going to continue to attend city council meetings and advocate for the Parks and Recreation Department. We have about 6 more weeks to put pressure on our elected officials. We think we can save Parks and Recreation. If we save the Parks and Recreation Department, we contribute to the quality of life for all the people that use those services. But we are not going to rely on our council to do the right thing, to make decisions for the greater good. We are going to do what Mayor McComb has refused to do on our behalf. For the Greater Good members, we'll be contacting those who have IDAs to ask them to make a donation to our Parks and Recreation Department. In looking at the budget shortfall, the mayor has said that there are no sacred cows, that everyone has to have skin in the game. And we agree that everyone needs to have skin in the game. We need to ask those corporations with IDAs to pay more, to pay their fair share for the greater good. Where we disagree with the mayor is about nothing being sacred. For the Greater Good believes that our people, our environment, our air, our water, and our public spaces are sacred. For decades, we have not viewed government as an affirmative state. We've seen government as a problem, not as an instrument that can be used to address public issues. We have not been using the power of government to ensure and enable human flourishing. The power of government has been used to enrich the few at the expense of the many. When I was a little girl here in Corpus, the power of government was used to ensure that I had a quality education. And as a result of using the power of the affirmative state, I was able to go to good schools and get a good education. I was afforded opportunities that were denied to my parents and to my elders. I know that my opportunity to become a professor was made possible by the sacrifices of Mr. Jose Cisneros and his family, and the 23 other families who sued CCISD for operating a separate and unequal education system. My presence here today is intimately connected to those community members advocating for change, advocating for the greater good, and to our public institutions that acted affirmatively. When looking at our national government, I really don't know how we here in Corpus Christi can compel our national elected officials to act affirmatively. But when I look at our community, here the possibilities seem endless. For the Greater Good's recent efforts have shown me that a few people with clear goals and with consistent, coordinated efforts can compel people in power to do the right thing. If we can amplify our voices, talk to each other, support each other, collaborate with each other, work towards goals that benefit everyone, not just those that have, I believe we can achieve great things. We have a few more weeks before City Council makes its final budgetary decisions about what's going to happen to our public spaces. We need to let them know that we are watching them. We need to let them know that we are tired of them giving away our tax dollars to corporate interests, many of which don't even live in our city or even our state. We need to let them know that we want those corporations with IDAs to pay their fair share. We need to let them know that we want our libraries, our senior and recreation centers, and our Parks and Recreation Department funded. We need to be vocal. We need to write emails, make telephone calls, go to public comments, and ask for responses back. We cannot let the council's resistance slow us down or stop us from acting. Our council members are our neighbors, our community representatives. For too long, we have not demanded much of them. Our civic engagement has been limited to serving on jury duties, if we do that, voting, and paying our taxes. Now is the time to engage in direct participatory democracy. Use your voice. Use your rights. I am a firm believer in setting standards. We need to set the public bar higher. We can set the public bar higher. Things always seem impossible until the day they aren't. Then we look back at all the work that we did, and we can see that arc toward our accomplishments. We can do this. We need to do this. And we only fail when we stop trying. For the Greater Good members are planning on getting together for a picnic on August 18th at Artesian Park. We're hoping we'll celebrate saving our libraries, senior centers, and Parks and Recreation Department. You all are more than welcome to come and have a picnic with us. Please join for the greater good and advocate for the greater good. As Jim Hightower said, we all do better when we all do better. Thank you for having me.